Okay, well, okay, I think it's 12:02. I know people will probably be filing in the next few minutes. But I know time is going to be short. So let's go ahead and start. And I want to welcome everybody to our panel on talking about the university structure and resources beyond the lab that can help you as a postdoc and maybe as a future faculty member in doing the research and the work that you need to do as a postdoc or as a faculty member. So today, I'm excited to have all of you here. My name is Dr. Robin Macaluso. I'm the Director of Postdoctoral Success, and I'm also an Associate Professor of Chemistry at University of Texas at Arlington. And I'd like to hand it over to Marianne so she can
Yes,
introduce herself.
yes. Good morning. I am Dr. Marianne Long, the Director of Postdoctoral Affairs at the University of Texas, El Paso. So we're in the Mountain Time Zone. So the folks of you in the afternoon, we're actually still in the morning over here. And like Robin said, we're excited to have you join us today. We are going to review some topics pertaining to the structure of a university. And this will be helpful for those who are considering applying for research grants, to give you an overview of what offices and what supports are there to help you.
Okay, and so we are joined today by our two distinguished panelists. We have Dr. James Grover. He is Dean of the Graduate School at University of Texas, Arlington. And we also have Dr. Corey Brown of the Office of Sponsored Projects, Research and Innovation at the University of Texas, El Paso. And right now, we'll let each of the panelists introduce themselves, provide a brief overview of their experiences and what their offices do. So, Dr. Grover, could you start us off?
Okay, thanks, Robin. So yes, I'm Jim Grover. I'm Dean of the Graduate School at UT Arlington. Before becoming Dean of the Graduate School, I was a faculty member in our biology department for about 20 years. I had a number of grants and a lot of research projects in an active lab, which I no longer have since I've been an administrator now for about 12 or 14 years. And as administrator, I've been associate dean in our College of Science, interim dean of science, interim dean of architecture, planning, and public affairs, and interim vice president for research, as well as now being dean of the graduate school as just a single job. During some of that time, I held two jobs. So, so I've seen a lot in terms of grants from all sides of it, the processing of grants, the writing of grants, the conduct of the research, et cetera. So I hope to share that with you today.
Great, thank you. And then Dr. Brown.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here to talk with everybody. I am the director of the Sponsored Projects Office here at UTEP. I've been in this office for 11 years now. I started as a research administrator, helping all the faculty and various people on campus submit proposals, and now I oversee a staff of about 25 people who are all dedicated to helping you all submit proposals and get funded and manage the awards when they're funded.
Okay, thank you. And then what we're going to do is start off with a question for each of our panelists, and then we'd like to dedicate the rest of the time to Q&A from the group, all the attendees. So let's just go ahead and start off. I have a question for Dr. Grover. Okay, so for Dr. Grover, I would like to ask about resources around the university. And we know that grant funding is a necessary component to support research. And so what resources and or facilities do universities provide to support grant writing for postdocs?
So I'll talk a little bit about grant writing in general and what universities do to support that, and then maybe focus a little bit more on things that are specific to postdocs. But it's important to understand the whole range of bureaucracy that it takes to support a research university. So our colleague here, Corey Brown, is from the Office of Sponsored Projects at UT El Paso. At UT Arlington, we have an office that does very similar things, but it has a different name, Office of Grant and Contract Services. And offices such as these are one of the components that a university needs to support research by faculty and postdocs and grad students and others. And these offices do a lot of the mechanics of putting together an application in the format required for submission to a sponsor, often a federal agency, but also others, making sure that all of the budget figures in that proposal are consistent with the sponsor guidelines and the university policies, making sure that all other aspects of the application, the proposal, are consistent with what the sponsor expects. And it is only authorized people in those offices who can actually submit a grant or a contract that can ultimately be awarded to the university. So their help is absolutely essential. And in most universities, there's an office very much like what Corey runs, and they will have to handle the mechanics of grant submission. So beyond that, there are varying degrees of support for the other things that are needed in putting together a proposal. There's a lot of thought, writing, knowledge, a lot of work that needs to be done before you're at a point where you can actually go to someone like one of Corey's staff and say, I want to submit to this program, and here's what I'm going to do, and help me with it, please. So it's important to understand what the opportunities for grant funding are in your field. That's something that you should be learning from your own supervisor, from the PI of the group that you're in. But you can also do a lot to explore that landscape of possibilities on your own. And many universities make available services that kind of package and identify grant funding opportunities from federal sponsors, from foundations, and from others. And so at any particular university, that may be offered in a somewhat different way from university to university, but most universities have these kinds of information services to give you some intelligence on the opportunities that are available. And that's an important resource to become familiar with. There are other resources that many universities make available to help people learn about what kinds of programs, ideas, how to write and package ideas to make a strong and competitive grant proposal. And here at UTA, most of that sort of assistance, that sort of guidance and help and support is provided through our Office of Research. And there are various things, like one of them is a series of lunch and learn seminars that sometimes deal with aspects of grant writing and what different kinds of agency programs are looking for. Sometimes we hire consultants from private firms that specialize in providing advice on grantsmanship. We have them come in and do seminars or workshops to help faculty, help postdocs learn how particular programs work. And those are usually a little more focused. Sometimes they're focused on things like the kind of postdocs that NIH offers to provide means of transitioning to faculty positions, K awards and related things. And so you can watch for announcements of those kinds of seminars and workshops to help with those kinds of specific programs. And then in some cases, there are workshops and training sessions that are offered by these same kinds of consulting firms at offsite locations. Some of them are, near to the federal agencies that provide the funding, and some institutions will send their early career faculty to these kinds of workshops to engage in a couple of days training and learn about some particular kind of program. I know that we at our university have sent people to learn about the NSF Career Awards from people who run seminars about that. So those are additional opportunities. And then something else that our institution has started doing recently, and many institutions do, is they have a proposal development center. And for the most part, the proposal development center is focused on either the kinds of large proposals that take a lot of effort to develop, where you really need someone who's almost a project manager kind of person just to help you put the proposal together in the first place. And so that kind of service is offered for very large multi-investigator, multi-site kind of grants. And then the other kind of support that our office offers is to things like NSF Career Awards that are specifically targeting early career faculty, so that early career faculty have a good chance to get that kind of award and become a known quantity to the federal sponsors. So I think I'll leave it at that, and let Robin move on to another question.
Okay, so are there resources that we should bring up that pertain to non-grant funding resources as well?
Well, there are certainly support, research
support
resources that support various things that are maybe a little bit less tied to writing a grant application and writing a competitive application. So for example, one of the things that our Office of Research does is administer things like the IACUC for animal research and the IRB for human subjects research. And they provide training sessions around writing protocols for working with animal or human subjects. And those, at our institution, those training sessions are open to graduate students, postdocs, and faculty. So anyone can go and learn how to write a protocol for human subjects research or a protocol for animal subjects research. So those kinds of things are offered. The Lunch and Learn series that our Office of Research does has some that are focused on grantsmanship, some that are focused on other aspects of research, how to manage a grant on the back end, and how to manage the payroll and all of the other stuff that has to be managed on a grant. So there are resources of that kind. Many institutions where a lot of research is conducted will have central facilities or core facilities, they're sometimes called, places where you can go with a set of samples, perhaps just to get some kind of routine analysis run. And they usually charge a fee, which is discounted for researchers at the home institution, and maybe higher for those coming in from outside. But they can provide a lot of support for analytical work and sequencing work and things like that. There was something else I was going to say, and now I've forgotten what it is. So maybe I'll just go ahead and stop there and see if there's further questions.
It might come up later. And I think that's an interesting point, that we have these resources about how to manage grants once we're awarded. And I think if any of the postdocs on the call are interested in a faculty position, it may not get the faculty position, but once you are there, you might have a little bit of a leg up in how to manage that award. Okay, so let's move to the question for Dr. Corey Brown. And so Corey, could you please highlight the major stages in grant proposal writing and how your office supports a professor or postdoc to write and submit that grant?
Sure, and that's a great question, especially for postdocs who may not be aware of how the process works at a university, might not have been a faculty member, or know how faculty interact with our office. So every university across the country has an office like mine, where everybody calls it something different. We're the Sponsored Projects Office. It could be a Contracts and Grants Office, but it is the main point of contact for anybody at the university wishing to submit a proposal for outside funding, whether it be federal funding, state funding, nonprofit, private funding, anything. And any dollar amount, it could be $1,000, it could be $1 million. You start by notifying the Office of Research, in my case, the Sponsored Projects Office. And so I would highly recommend everybody who's thinking about going down this route, make friends with your Sponsored Projects Office. Here at UTEP, every department across campus has a dedicated research administrator, is what we call them, assigned to them. And that is their point of contact to guide the PIs, principal investigators, through the grant submission process. But as far as writing a proposal goes, I generally boil it down to 5 major steps of how to do the whole process and get something submitted. And it starts with preparation. You have to prepare for what you're going to do on the project, who you're going to target to submit to. So you have to start by finding a funding agency that aligns with the work that you're doing. There's a lot of opportunities here at UTEP to help you find that agency. We have a proposal development team here as well that can guide you and take a look at the work that you're doing and target certain agencies that will be beneficial to you. The second step is designing a project. Just because there's a funding opportunity out there doesn't mean that you have a fully fledged project that's ready to be submitted. So designing that project and aligning it to the goals and needs of the agency that you're submitting it to is a key step. And then once you've designed it, you have to actually write it. So you're talking about writing the abstract, the narrative, any other key documents that are going to be submitted to the agency. And there's a lot of documents out there that a lot of people don't realize need to be submitted. They think, oh, you know, I have a 15-page narrative and I'll just deal with that and everything else will be easy. That's not the case. You have CVs and biosketches you have to write. There's a ton of other documents that most agencies ask for. And it's a little bit more difficult than writing a 15-page document and calling it a day. And then another key step is refining what you've written. Here at UTEP, we offer a service where anybody who's writing a proposal can send their proposal for outside critique and assistance. And we have a third party that we contract with, and they do nationwide searches for subject matter experts, and we'll send it out and give you critical feedback on your narrative so that you can refine it and adjust it as needed. And then the final step is submitting your actual proposal, which is not as simple as people think. Again, like Dr. Grover said, there are only certain people at the universities who are authorized to submit proposals on behalf of the university. My office happens to be the authorizing office here at UTEP. And so I have a team of about 10 research administrators who have signature authority from the president to sign all applications. And it's a lot of paperwork. There's some online systems out there. NIH has their own, NSF has their own. There's grants.gov, which covers all federal agencies for the most part. And then there's private and individual or nonprofit organizations that have their own websites. So you may not have logins for all of them, but we do. And so we can help you upload all of the documents, check everything, make sure everything is formatted correctly, and is in alignment with all of the guidelines, and then we actually submit it. And then the fun part is you have to wait usually about 6 months to a year before you hear back on whether it's funded or not. So it's a long process, but you have people at every institution dedicated to helping you. So I would highly suggest you make friends with those people, and the process will be much smoother.
Sorry about that. I'd like to, I put in the chat window, but I'd like to just ask or let everybody know that you're all welcome to submit a question in the chat window. And so Corey, how far in advance, you know, if we're looking at a grant submission, how far in advance should we contact your office? And
I mean, we always tell everybody as early as possible to let us know upfront early. There are deadlines that we have to meet internally. For example, UTEP has a 5-day submission policy rule where we need to have all the documents 5 days ahead of the actual submission due date. So if the submission is next Friday, then we need everything by this coming Monday in order to submit. But that doesn't mean that you should be letting us know at the last minute. You're probably working on these proposals 6 months to a year out, depending on what type of proposal it is. And so there's a long lead time before you actually get to submitting a proposal. So the earlier you notify your office, the better. Here at UTEP, we have what we call a notice of intent. It's an online form that the professors and postdocs and anybody submitting fills out, and that just flags your research administrator and says, hey, I'm thinking about submitting to this agency on this deadline, and it puts it on our calendar so that we can prepare to assist you as best as we can. Keep in mind that you're not the only one submitting a proposal. So the university here at UTEP, we have on average about 700 proposals a year. And so managing those 700 proposals across 10 people can be a little difficult. So the sooner you let us know, the better we can assist you, and we can fit you into the schedule and make sure everything is working with your schedule as well, as far as writing the grant and preparing the documents. So the sooner the better, but any time is preferred.
Thank you. And we do have a question from one of our attendees, and it could be for either of you to answer. I think both of your expertise would be helpful. How do you navigate applying for grants as a postdoc? And does the project have to be directly related to your currently funded research, or can it be outside of your postdoc research?
I mean, for me, I would say that as long as you can justify it in the narrative that you're able to complete the research and you have either the necessary skills or you have a team of people around you, that would be beneficial to writing the grant. Specifically to postdocs here at UTEP, postdocs are allowed to submit proposals for outside funding, but we do require that you have a faculty mentor assigned to the project as well, just in case something happens. And that's mostly because awards are made to the university, not the individual. So you as a postdoc may be here for the next 3 or 4 years, but if you get a job and leave, the university wants to make sure that we can maintain that project and that award that we promised the government or the agency that we were going to finish.
Yeah, and I'll just add that who gets to be a PI on a grant or who is qualified to be a co-investigator with another investigator is something that the institution determines. So it will vary from university to university what postdocs might be allowed to do. Certainly the usual thing is that programs that are specifically designed to make awards to postdocs, and as Corey said, legally they're awards to the university. In some cases, they're actually awards to the postdoc. Both things exist, but there are programs out there that are primarily for postdocs. And any of those kinds of programs, most universities will support the efforts of a postdoc to obtain that kind of funding. Where it can get more tricky is with funding that is not specifically targeted at postdocs, the kind of regular investigator-initiated or grant programs that many agencies have. The agency may or may not feel comfortable with an individual who, say, doesn't have a faculty appointment being an investigator, and that's an issue to think about. The institution may decide they're not comfortable with it and won't support it. So you kind of have to navigate that by just asking questions and trying to understand if it's the right opportunity for you and that you'll get the support from the institution that could make it happen. If that doesn't align, then you really have to put your efforts elsewhere.
That's great. I wonder if you could share with us your opinion on how important are grants for advancing someone's academic career. So most postdocs may be looking and launching their career as a tenure track faculty member or academia. And so how important are applying for and receiving grants important to advance your career in that aspect?
Well, I can answer that, and I'd really say it depends a lot on the institution. As a postdoc, you're probably employed at a research institution, and I looked at some of the places that you all said you were from, and you're employed at research institutions. At a research institution, it's pretty near essential for a faculty member to obtain grants if they are in a field of study where grants are available and the faculty at other research universities in those areas generally have grants. So I phrase it that way because we all know there are some disciplines where there's much less grant opportunity in the humanities, for example, and we would not necessarily expect people in those disciplines to have the level of grant funding we would expect from someone in science or engineering. But making the effort to get recognized by external sponsors and obtain grants is important at a research university. It's important at many universities where research may not be as central to the mission and there may be more of a teaching mission, so sort of mixed universities in their mission. It's still important to be doing some amount of grant effort at many of those institutions. And there are examples of institutions where obtaining grant money is not as important. Most two-year colleges, community colleges, don't really look at whether their faculty get grants or not. And then on the other hand, they expect a lot more in terms of teaching performance from their faculty. There are some private institutions that are primarily teaching undergraduates, and again, may not expect that their faculty will really be out there getting highly competitive large grants. But at a research institution, it is very essential that someone be able to demonstrate that they can get the kind of grant money that is generally available within their discipline.
So there are other positions, research positions, or different kinds of faculty appointments now. And they may vary from institution to institution. So if you're, say, at El Paso, maybe the title is a little bit different, or in any other university. But we have positions like an associate professor of research or something like that, or maybe somebody who's an assistant professor of instruction. What kinds of resources are there for them to support their work in research and or teaching as well? Is it different? Is it unique? Is there something that is tailored to them?
For those faculty who have a research faculty position, in the cases that I'm familiar with, these are individuals who are usually fairly experienced and successful with getting grant money because their salary depends entirely on their continued funding. And for them, the support that's provided is very similar to what would be provided to the regular tenure stream faculty. But the expectation is maybe has higher stakes, because the expectation is that they're raising their own salary. But nevertheless, there are people who are able to do that. I'm not going to say that it's easy. When it comes to faculty who will have to teach in the classroom, many institutions now have something like a Center for Teaching and Learning. It may go by other names, but a place that's a resource for faculty to go and learn about teaching, learn about the learning process, learn about pedagogy, learn about classroom management, learn about many other things that are necessary to do a good job of teaching. And in an institution that's highly teaching oriented, like a community college, they may do quite a bit of that kind of support work for faculty who are really only doing teaching. So it depends on the institution what the opportunities would be to get faculty positions that were dedicated solely to teaching or solely to research. But where those kinds of positions are common, institutions usually do invest in helping people succeed in those positions. There are some other kinds of research personnel in some kinds of very large research institutes and research centers. There may be people who go by titles like research scientist or research engineer. And those are often full-time positions that are partly, but maybe not entirely grant funded, where the institution has resources to put into maintaining whatever institute or center is involved. Those resources might come from endowments. They might come from special state appropriations at a public university. And that's another class of position that is maybe a little bit more stable than a research professor type of position would be, and a little bit less reliant on grant funding. But usually with such positions, there is an expectation that grants will be sought and obtained with regularity.
Okay. All right, thank you. Corey, did you have anything to add to that? Or?
No, that was great. That covered it. There are lots of different opportunities out there. It just depends on what you want to specialize in or what you want to do. Either research or a combination of research, teaching, service. It's all there and available. If you're focused solely on research, it is up to you to get the grants to cover your salary for the most part. So it just depends.
Okay. And do you all handle internal funding opportunities as well? So far we've been focusing on external opportunities. I know at UTA, I'm not familiar with what is available at UTEP, but most likely there's some internal funding opportunities as well. Is your office involved with any of those, Corey?
So we know about them, but we don't directly assist with them because it's all internal funding. We have another unit under the research and innovation umbrella called research development that sponsors all the internal funding. And it is there. And we do provide some assistance if people need have questions on how to budget for certain line items that they're asking for. We can help with that. But we don't typically see the full or final proposals, and we don't submit them ourselves. We let the faculty do that themselves.
There are a lot of institutions that do invest in the development of their faculty by providing internal grant programs, seed grant programs of various kinds. At UTA, we have some within our Office of Research. There's a handful that are outside of that that are administered by other means, including a program that provides funding for postdocs, which we administer from the graduate school here. So it does vary somewhat from institution to institution how exactly those are managed and housed. But many institutions that conduct research or expect research to be conducted by their faculty will make internal grant programs available. And usually they're restricted to faculty and even to faculty on the tenure track. So postdocs aren't able to access them, and they are not at UTA. But should any of you get into a faculty position at a research institution, you should look for those internal opportunities. They can be good ways to get a little bit of seed money for an idea before it's ready for a federal agency to sponsor it. They can be a good way just to develop the skills that are necessary to develop and explain and sell an idea. So they are certainly something that people should be involved with if they go into faculty positions and have the opportunities to do that. And I will say that most of them are genuinely peer reviewed. The people who manage them will make an attempt to get reviews usually from simply within the research community on campus, but sometimes with external review. We'll make an attempt to get honest reviews of the work, and so again, that's an opportunity to practice what's necessary to succeed in peer review.
Yeah, as a faculty member, I think those are beneficial because they can get you a little bit of seed money to get some preliminary results, maybe a semester's worth, and then submit, work with somebody like, Corey's office to submit a larger external grant. And are they always offered through the same office? Because I think I've seen some that are more research oriented, some that are maybe more teaching oriented, or even service. So do they all go through the same office?
The general answer is probably no, they don't all go through the same office. Every institution will probably do it a little bit differently, but there are some grants that are research focused and offered through our Office of Research at UTA. There are some teaching grants that are offered by our Center for Teaching and Learning. There are some that run outside of that are more focused, say within a particular college where the dean's office runs it. There may be something like an endowed center. I've helped an endowed center help them develop a seed grant process. So it may originate in various places. It may have various goals. As Robin said, sometimes maybe it will focus on teaching innovations. Sometimes it may focus on community service. But many times it does focus on research.
I would say at UTEP, we are trying to consolidate them to a single office. It's not the easiest process in the world, but our research development office is working with every college here across campus on setting up a seed project specifically for their colleges. Right now, postdocs are not allowed to submit directly, but they can work with faculty on a submission, but that might change in the future. So it varies, but here at UTEP, research development is the place to go.
So
Yeah,
one thing that's often kind of overwhelming for postdocs is where to even begin, right? And so are there any particular databases or websites that you recommend to look for opportunities for funding or even to look at successful grant applications?
There are a ton out there. UTEP uses a system called Pivot. It's a system that we subscribe to that will email you or flag you based on what you put into it, what funding opportunities are available that matches your needs. Our research development office is also really good at working with you to find those opportunities that you want. Most schools have a system like Pivot in place where you can plug in your email address and your CV and it will start feeding you opportunities. Outside of that, the government has their own websites. They're not the easiest to use, but they're out there and they show you what's available. There's Fed Connect, there's grants.gov. So there are things out there, and I would just advise people if you're curious about or you're new to grants, you want to start, reach out to either my office, the Office of Sponsored Projects, or Research Development, and we can start pointing you in the right direction and guiding you.
I'll add to that to say that the federal sites that Corey mentioned, most of the federal agencies will post some public information about every project that they fund. They'll post a title, they'll post a project summary, they'll post the names of the institution and the investigators. So you can really look and learn a lot from seeing what's been funded by a particular program in, say, the last 3 years. Because if your research aligns very well with things that have been funded in the last 3 years, that's an indication that office is one to send an application to. So that can be a good thing to do. The other thing I'll say is that some institutions, some individual colleges or departments run archives of proposals that faculty have been successful with in the past. Not everybody does that. Not everybody wants to put their proposals up for other people to see, and that's fair enough. But it is sometimes possible to get an example, one or more examples of what a successful proposal in your field looks like. And some faculty are just willing to share individually. So it can be worth asking.
So I'm glad you brought that up. It got me to look up at UTA and at other institutions. There may be something very similar. We have a Center for Proposal Development, and I just put in the link to that website so that even if you're not at UTA, maybe you can find a similar unit on your campus, and it might have some similar goals and some activities. And if you are at UTA, you can enter from there a SharePoint, and it'll, I haven't looked too much actually, but it looks like there's a sort of an archive or a database where you can search up some funded proposals. I'm guessing that maybe some faculty have contributed funded proposals for their colleagues' benefit to learn from. And so that might be something that's helpful. And I see Corey put in a link too to maybe a similar group at UT El Paso.
We do have a question in the Q&A. So one of our attendees has asked, how should a PI handle failed grant applications? And should you quickly resubmit a revised proposal? And then there's a follow-up question, but let's take care of those ones first.
So what you should do depends a little bit on how the reviews turned out. If it looks like something that will be a quick resubmission, that is often the best thing to do. If it looks like something that really has what we perceive to be a lot of problems and reasons why it wasn't funded, then it's probably worth taking the time to do a longer, more thorough job of revising it before resubmitting it, or even thinking about a different program entirely, because it may be that it's misaligned with the program's objectives. It's usually worth calling up the program officer who was responsible for handling the proposal and asking if there's anything they can do to clarify or amplify upon the reviewer's comments. They're not going to tell you how to rewrite a proposal, but and they're not going to tell you things that stray very far from the written record, but they can be helpful in giving you a sense of whether this is something that was really close or something that's far enough from being competitive that you need to do some more serious thinking. Another thing to understand is that some agencies have essentially no deadlines or rolling deadlines, so that you have the flexibility to decide if you're going to try to do a quick resubmission, clarify 1 or 2 points and get it right back, or whether you need to go longer. If they have rolling deadlines, that may be easy to accommodate either option. There are other programs that have really hard deadlines, maybe once a year, maybe twice a year. And so you've got to think about which of those deadlines is going to allow you enough time to do the kind of revision that will make it successful. There's probably not a lot of value in resubmitting quickly just to resubmit quickly, because if you get the reputation of being an investigator who submits a lot of proposals that get rejected and submits maybe a dozen of them a year, that honestly doesn't help you. It's usually better to focus on the quality, the best quality that you can achieve, not to focus on the speed or the quantity that you can achieve.
And Corey, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've seen everything. I've seen people submit within a week of a rejection and not change anything, and it doesn't change the outcome. It just delays it a little further. And then we see the people who actually read the comments and the summary statements, take it to heart, and actually make some modifications that are decent and good and what the agency is looking for. So I've seen it all across the board, and I would agree with Dr. Grover that take your time, really look at it and decide what's best for you in the proposal, and then decide how to move forward. Rushing it is not always the best option.
And Dr. Grover, you answered this next question, but maybe if either of you have anything else to offer. Is it better to apply for as many grants as possible, or just focus on a few select opportunities?
I would say focus.
Focus.
That would certainly be my observation. I did actually once have a meeting with several program officers from NSF who visited our university, and they had come with a 2 or 3 year analysis of the patterns of submission on the part of all of our PIs. This was long enough ago now that I don't think there's any need to keep these results a secret. We had some PIs who were submitting 18 proposals a year and never getting funded. If you're writing 18, 15-page proposals for NSF every year, probably you're not going to get them funded. And the people who were getting success and getting consistent success were submitting about 2 to 3 proposals a year. There were a few people who would submit 1 every other year and be successful with it. But for sure, the people who were submitting large numbers were not successful. And I, to be honest, I got the sense that the program officers felt a little bit burdened. It stretches the review community. The reviewers who are regularly on panels, some of them will get a sense of somebody who's just, creating paper without having much merit in it.
Yes,
So don't blow it by submitting too many and not focusing on the quality.
We could generally tell really fast who's submitting just to check a box to say that they submitted a proposal that year, versus somebody who took their time and wrote a really good proposal that they really wanted to get funded.
The inside scoop for everyone that's joining. Before we maybe take one more question, just for the folks who are here, I'm just launching a poll really quick. We're trying to just get a sense of what's a good time for our future webinars. So if you don't mind taking the poll. And then if you do have a pressing question you want to ask in the Q&A, I think we have time for one more question.
I don't see anything. So if anybody has one, please feel free to put their question in the chat. I'm not seeing one, but I think somebody had mentioned something about, program officers. So when I was just starting out, this was really much like a fog to me. So I think it would be really useful to discuss now in just a couple of minutes. How do you get to know a program officer? And what kind of relationship do we have with them? Can we communicate, or can postdocs and can faculty communicate with them directly? Do you call them? Do you email? How do you go about doing that?
Well, I may be a little bit out of date since much of my career was back in Stone Ages, I guess. But it's usually best to call them, but you don't necessarily want to call them cold. You can email and ask if there's a good time when they can have a conversation. They are very busy people, so you need to respect that. And if you are seriously considering submitting an application for a particular program, you should call one of the program officers. That's why they put their contact info in the call for proposals. They're not going to tell you whether or not you should submit your proposal. They may help clarify what are the boundaries of proposals or the goals that they're trying to achieve with the program to give you a sense of whether your work aligns or not. But they'll never tell you yes or no. Do this, don't do it. So you have to expect that. You can call them after a proposal has been rejected. They will usually call you if it's been accepted. What you should also do, I think, and this is something you can do more as an early career faculty member, as soon as the agency or agencies that you go to will take you on as a peer reviewer or a panelist, get that role. So it varies from institution, or excuse me, from agency to agency. NIH will look for more experienced people usually to be reviewers and panelists. NSF will look for a broad range of people at different career stages. They'll try to get some early career faculty as reviewers and panelists. So it's worth doing that. That's when you really get to know the program officers, is when you sit on a panel, especially, and you see how they manage the proposals, the concerns that they have, the questions that they ask the panelists during the discussions. That can really help you get a sense of how a proposal becomes competitive. And that's a really good investment of your time as an early career faculty member at whatever agency you think you're gonna be going to for much of your career.
I've also heard from other faculty here at UTEP who approach program officers at conferences and trainings. And that way, when you do email them and ask for a phone call, it's not out of the blue. They remember and know who you are and are more likely to assist. So don't feel afraid to approach them if you're at a conference and they're there.
Thank you.
Well, thank you to the both of you. We just wanted to end it and thank you once again, and to all of our attendees, thanks for hopping on, and be on the lookout for a future email for our next webinar in March. We're going to be talking about pursuing the faculty route, and so you may want to join us even if you're just thinking about it. And we're going to discuss tenure track faculty, teaching faculty, all of the package, really. And thank you again to Dr. Grover and Dr. Brown, and we'll end it there.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.